Hey, good morning, everybody. It's about 7:50 on this Monday, the day after Mother's Day. Hope you all had a good one. I'm here to talk about, and you'll see the links provided to the articles down below, the history of Sonic the Hedgehog Saturday morning. In other words, the history of Sonic the Hedgehog Saturday. Now, this is something I did. I typed it up, or Dragon naturally speaked it up, if you will, um, about a week or so ago. My plan was, and still is in some ways, is to do some kind of a slideshow or something like that with pictures, not footage, but still pictures of what I'm talking about here. My plan is still that, but if it doesn't come to fruition, so be it. But I thought I'd talk about the first season, kind of give you a video representation on camera of what I typed up, and believe me, it's 10 pages worth. So, you better sit back and relax, because this might take a while. Maybe it won't, but we'll see. So, but anyway, here we go with the history of Sonic the Hedgehog Saturday morning inning, and here we go right now. Alright, first season. Many look at this first season, or season 1, as an introductory season, because throughout this season, we were pretty much given an idea of who these characters were, aka the Freedom Fighters, and what their missions were all about. The episode that starts us off is called Supersonic. Now this of course is not the pilot episode. Instead, this episode establishes who the main characters are and basically what the character design looks like. Here we are introduced to 3 new characters, unless of course you read the comic books beforehand, because the comics kind of came out I think a few months before, I'm not really sure. Beforehand, those characters of course are Princess Sally, Bunny Rabbit, and Rotor. As we start this first episode of the series, we see them working on a little project. This project, of course, is to try to provide light to the meeting area in the home/hideout known as Knothole Village. The village is actually hidden deep within a forest known as the Great Forest. We are also introduced to, I guess you could say, a minor character for the first season, and that is Sally's handheld computer known as Nicole, who later on in the comics, years later, would get a true humanoid/Mobian Lynx form. Of course we see Sonic here as well, and we find out that the Freedom Fighters, more specifically Sally and Sonic, have to go to a rundown city known as Robotropolis, which happens to be the former kingdom they lived in called Mobotropolis, to find some spare parts to fix the malfunctioning circuits in Nicole. Now, during this episode and throughout the first season, in fact throughout most of the series, we see that Robotnik's main goal is to not only capture Sally and Sonic and thus turn them into robots, but also to find the location of the village, for it is the last piece in the puzzle for him to conquer and rule the planet. Excuse me. Now I give the writers credit for the first episode in the series. Not to give much away for those that may have not seen it, but the way this first episode was wrote/written, it almost makes you believe that Sally and Bunny are going to end up/remain mind-controlled slaves of Robotnik for the rest of the season. But thankfully, that did not happen, and at the same time, we see exactly what Sonic, Sally, and Bunny can contribute to their team. Now for the rest of the season. And I know I'm saying now a lot, so I apologize. But basically, for the rest of the season, the episodes, unlike the next season, are non-continuity. In other words, they don't follow each other. In other words, each of them is a good example, but they do not. But they don't. It's not a good example. It's early, so it's not even 8 o'clock yet. So I'm sorry about that. Okay, what was that? All right. In other words, each one of them is a good episode, but they don't connect. There are, though, some episodes from the first season that have a connection to episodes in the second season. One episode in particular is Ultrasonic, for its connection lies within the fact that not only do we see the freedom fighters looking for spare roboticizer parts, but by using a power ring, they are at least, for this episode temporarily, able to free Sonic's Uncle Chuck. Now, how does this connect to the second season? We'll talk about that when we get to the second season. As far as the rest of the first season goes, it definitely established that this show was not only filled with action, adventure, but at times it could be dark, dramatic, and of course, humorous. However, the one difference that you had among some other Saturday morning cartoons was the fact that it was one of the rare Saturday morning cartoons that had its pilot episode aired last instead of first. The pilot episode, entitled Heads or Tails, showcased the characters as they were originally first seen in the comic books by many fans, and gave us an idea of what the original concept looked like. And of course, recently the original intro, or at least part of the original intro, was uploaded onto YouTube, and again gave us the idea of what the original concept and design of the characters was going to be. So for many of us, seeing the pilot episode last was like watching the earlier issues of the comic book come to life, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Alright, second season. Now we're on to the second season here. Now this season, season 2, second season, now this season definitely had more continuity to it than the first season. Right off the bat, in the first episode entitled Game Guy, we find out that there are other freedom fighter groups besides the main freedom fighter group. And that the only way they can be found is by following a list that contains each and every one of them. Basically what the group's name is and where the location is. Now this of course doesn't get used until the second half of the second season. Now remember when I said that some episodes in the first season had a connection and continuation in the second season? Well, in the episode Sonic Conversion, we see just that. We see a continuation not just from the first episode of Season 2, but from the Ultrasonic episode from Season 1. For it is here that we see the reasoning of the freedom fighters looking for spare parts. The reasoning being is so they can build a de-roboticizing machine. I kind of said it differently here, and you'll see that when you read, if you want to read it as well. So they can build a de-roboticizing machine that reverses the effects of the roboticizer. Of course, Bunny Rabbit is the first one it's tried out on, and this proves to be a success. However, Sally wants to wait at least 24 hours to see whether or not the effects are temporary or permanent. But of course, Sonic doesn't want to wait. So basically, by repeating the same formula they did in the first season and acknowledging said episode of the first season, frees his Uncle Chuck temporarily to try and reverse the roboticizing effects, or at least try to de-roboticize him, placed on him years ago. Unfortunately, the first de-robotization attempt is unsuccessful, but after getting a spare part that they need, the second de-robotization attempt is a success. Unfortunately, as Sally feared, the effects on both Bunny and Chuck. I'm sorry, like I said, it's early still. It's about 7:59, so again, I apologize. uh, okay, what was I? Okay, unfortunately, as Sally feared, the effects on both Bunny and Uncle Chuck are only temporary. The only bright spot is towards the end of the episode when Uncle Chuck regains his free will full time and acts as a spy for them, as well as at the same time getting the spare parts they need for their de-roboticizer. It's good. Now, one of the highlights of the first half of the second season was the two-part miniseries Blast to the Past. The premise of this, as crazy as it sounds, is due to the fact that the freedom fighters lost two of their own to robotization. Even though these two that they lost succeeded in accomplishing a goal that they had during the mission they were on. Now, it's thanks to the newest freedom fighter who we get introduced to in the first episode of the second season. Her name is Dulcie and she's a dragon. But it was her that suggested to Sonic and Sally to go to a floating island and use some magical emblems, the time stones, to go back in time and prevent their enemy from taking over. In other words, prevent from Robotnik from, corrupting the kingdom and taking over. Now, they do succeed in going back in time. Unfortunately, they arrive on the day of the coup. In other words, the day of the takeover. No thanks to Sonic messing up his end of the spell that sent them back in time to the year 3224. Basically what Sonic did was, instead of concentrating on the year and where they were going to basically appear in front of, they were saying the year like Palace Fountain 3224, Palace Fountain 3224, and on the third time, Sally says it correctly, but Sonic's like Palace Fountain 32 Chili Dog. So that kind of messes them up a little bit. And I guess they threw that in there for the humor, What was it? Okay. Now, the positives for them in Blast to the Past are, 1, Sally gets to see her father and tries to warn him about what's going to happen, but fails. 2, they get the original plans for the roboticizer. And 3, Sally, I guess you could say, saves the closest thing to family for her in their nanny, Rosie, by having Rosie, their nanny, promise to never leave Knothole. The reason being is because originally Rosie got caught and roboticized. And what's funny about this too is Rosie actually knows that Sally before, she goes with the kids to Knothole. Alright, now what was it? Alright. Now, after this episode, after Blast of the Past, after the two-parter that is, they had what many considered an unnecessary 2 11-minute cartoon filler episode. In other words, the episode that they had afterwards was one of 2 11-minute shorts, contained 2 11-minute shorts. Kind of think of most of the 101 Dalmatian cartoon series. Most of their episodes at times were kind of like 2 11-minute shorts. Same here. But anyway, what was I? Okay, now after this episode, they had what many considered an unnecessary 2 11-minute cartoons filler episode, which of course would be the first of 2. And as some have said, you could take this one and the one that comes later out of the rotation and nothing would be affected. In fact, one of the friends I subscribe to here on YouTube, Rasitsu, Danielle, who also contributes to thefellowinthecoat.com, basically stated that if you take this one and the one that comes later out of the rotation, these 11-minute filler episodes, nothing would be affected. It's like they weren't, basically she's saying, and a lot of people agree, they weren't necessary. But I'll explain why they were necessary in a little bit. Alright. Following this filler episode, we get an episode focused on our newest character, Dulcie, and then after that we get an episode which is kind of like a prelude to the final 4 episodes slash arc of the series, called The Void. And it's in this episode that we get introduced to a new villain character named Nagus, who hates our main villain character, Robotnik, as much, if not more so, than the Freedom Fighters. For you see, Robotnik betrayed Nagus during the takeover back in 3224. Basically what that tells you is that Nagus was supposed to be the one Robotnik was supposed to hand the kingdom over, but Robotnik instead took it for himself. Alright, what was it? Okay. It's also in this episode that Sally finally finds out where her father has been for the past 15 to 16 years. Now, when you see this and you kind of compare it to the first season, see, they didn't have nothing really established. Like I said, the first season was like an introductory season, so it made you think the king had recently disappeared. Here, it's more established that he had been gone far longer than that. Well, maybe more like 10, 11 years, but 15, 16 years, I don't know. Okay. Alright, now what was I? Oh yeah. Unfortunately, he and Nagus cannot leave the void or else they will die. In other words, Sonic did bring them out along with Bunny and Ari, another character that we got introduced to during this season, in the first episode that is, out of the void. But unlike Ari, who was in there, Nagus and the king's longevity in that void causes them to crystallize. In other words, if they stay out, they're going to crystallize and die. Okay. What was it? Alright. Unfortunately, he and Nagus cannot leave the void or else they will die. And it is here that Sally finally obtains the Freedom Fighter list that was mentioned in the first episode of the second season, which of course will be further used in the upcoming saga slash arc. Now, just like after the 2-part miniseries Blast to the Past, we get another 2 11-minute cartoons filler episode. For those wondering why there were 2 episodes like this, was because they wanted to lighten up the second season from the first season, due to some rumored complaints. In other words, from what we have heard, rumorized, there were some parents and some other situations out there that, there was basically some rumored complaints, either from parents and I don't know who else, that felt that the first season was just too dark and needed to be lightened, needed to be more humorous. I don't know. Okay, what was I? Alright. Okay, for those wondering why there were 2 episodes like this, filler episodes, was because they wanted to lighten up the second season from the first season due to some complaints, due to some rumored complaints. That was the reason for these 2 filler episodes with the 11-minute shorts in them. However, after that second filler episode, we finally get to what I consider the main event of the series in the second season. It's something that myself and many fans like to call the Doomsday Project saga, or if you piece them together with only the Doomsday Project title card at the beginning after the intro, it's more like the Doomsday Project movie. The reason I say that is because every episode flows right into the next one almost effortlessly. I mean, every episode in this arc is good. Basically, here's the premise. Robotnik's built this massive global changing machine so he could finish what he started before Sonic and his friends came along. Because this final saga slash arc is so big, it requires our heroes to get help from the other Freedom Fighter groups that were on the list that Sally's father gave her. In fact, a lot of things finally occur and happen within these final 4 episodes. 1. Tails becomes an official freedom fighter. 2. Antron finally gets a kiss from Sally for being heroic. Basically, what happened in the second to last episode, they had these magnetizing vests, and they were hooked onto the bottom of these tankers, and they were trying to uh, get the fuel. Uh, I can't even think of the name right. I can't even think of the word right now. Oh yeah, they were trying to siphon the gas, the oil, and whatever it was out of the tankers. And what happened is one of the circuits, one of the wires on Sally's vest came loose, and she was just like dangling by her hand. And Antron, being right there, grabbed onto her vest as best he could, and gave her enough time to hook the wire back in, and allow her to remagnetize herself to the bottom of the tanker. So that's why he got the kiss. All right, and okay. 1. Tails becomes an official freedom fighter. 2. Antron finally gets a kiss from Sally for being heroic. 3. We are introduced to a new character. Who gains a huge fan base following, her name being Loop, or Lupe. And 4. Robotnik finally finds out that he's being spied on by Uncle Chuck, and so much more. In other words, he finally figures out, oh, wait a minute. Finally figures out, the reason his missions or his plans are always failing is because he's got a spy, and he finds out it's Uncle Chuck. And again, like I said, and so much more. Basically, there's much more that was basically resolved or taken care of in this arc. All right. Of course, this ends with Sonic and Sally using the Power Stones, which were introduced in the second episode of the saga, Hedgehog, to destroy the Doomsday Machine. The Power Stones, of course, allowed Sally to know what it feels like to use a power ring by the power of Sonic's speed being transferred into her, along with a bit of his personality. As seen towards the end of the episode, when she wants to see what a kiss can do after seeing the effects of a high five. In other words, because, they just glue, it's like the high five they did got intensified by, I guess, 5-fold or 10-fold. Sally wants to see what effect a kiss can have. And of course you would think, well, wait a minute, that would be more like Sonic wanting to attempt something like that, right? And that's what I mean by a bit of his personality maybe being transferred into her. Okay, alright. Now, despite having a good ending/finale, the one thing that bothered fans for many years was the fact that the show ended on a cliffhanger. The cliffhanger was one of speculation for many years to come, for no one knew who those red eyes belonged to at the end. For years, fans speculated two theories. One, of course, because of the time. Like I said earlier. One, of course, because of the time frame and release of the Sonic CD game, many speculated that it could be Metal Sonic. Which, when you look at the time frame of when this episode/cliffhanger was released, to many fans, it would have made a lot of sense that it would be Metal Sonic. However, for a second speculation, also because of the time frame of release for its game, which was entitled Sonic 3, and introduced us to the character of Knuckles the Echidna. And again, just like the first speculation, because of the time frame of the game's release in which Knuckles was introduced, in many fans' eyes, this too would have made sense. In other words, many fans felt, basically the speculation was, either it's got to be Metal, or it's going to be Knuckles. Because of the time frame of both Sonic CD's release and Sonic 3's release. But surprisingly, years later, Ben Hurst, the late Ben Hurst, who was the head/lead story writer for the second season and did some episodes for the first season, in a chat that he had online with some fans back in the early 2000s, he finally revealed that the eyes belonged to the wizard villain Axis Nagus, who was seen in the void, and told us, or at least told those fans, that he would have been the new villain for the upcoming season. In other words, Nagus being in the void was basically giving us a taste of what he could be, of who he would be, of what we would be in store for that third season. Speaking of which, by now everyone knows that a third season was indeed planned for the show. Unfortunately, due to the fact that the ABC Children's Broadcasting Program / network was being cleaned out, if you will, and those that ran the children's programming when Sonic was on were being let go / laid off. And the new people that came on board decided they were not interested in Sonic as well as some of the other shows and decided to cancel it. This, of course, was at a time when certain situations required that even Saturday morning cartoon blocks have some educational value to them. And I guess Sonic, along with some of the other shows, didn't have that educational value. Even though one show that debuted at the same time as Sonic, this show of course being called Reboot, lasted a few more years on ABC before it was moved to syndication and Cartoon Network. Now, with the cancellation of Sonic, a lot of the ideas that Ben Hurst had for the third season had to be shelved indefinitely or around the mid-90s for the time, or during the mid-90s for the time being. His initial plans, as he told us before, and in the 2000 interview that he did for the official series DVD box set, he had a few things in mind. One, he was going to have Sally romanced by someone else other than Sonic. 2, Tails was going to discover some great power he had within and use it to save the freedom fighters from a great disaster. And 3, he also had plans for Snively to ascend to the position that Robotnik once had. Basically, he came out and said that it would be a whole new ballgame for the characters. And even though it's hard to believe, Ben Hurst, according to some sources, not only had the third season planned out, but also had a fourth and possible fifth season planned out as well, or at least planning it out in his mind of what he wanted to do. One of those plans, according to several sources, was at the end of the third season and going into the possible fourth season, he was going to introduce Knuckles for the first time in animated form. So in other words, instead of Underground being his American animated debut, he would have made his debut in SatAM. Okay, what was it? Alright. One of those plans, according to several sources, was at the end of the third season and going into the possible fourth season, he was going to introduce Knuckles for the first time in animated form. That was one of his plans according to the source or sources. I believe that there were also plans to bring in Metal Sonic in one of those would have been seasons. And I think the last I heard from these sources was he was even planning to And I think the last I heard from these sources was he was even planning to bring in Amy Rose in one of those would have been seasons. But again, thanks to the new brass at ABC Children's Programming at the time, along with the third season, these other possible seasons never came to be, and just like with the third season's ideas, had to be shelved indefinitely / permanently. Ben Hurst, however, never gave up for a while. He even, from what I understand, tried to team up with the head writer of the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book at the time, by Archie Comics, this being, of course, Ken Penders. And along with him, tried to get a possible movie adaptation off the ground. However, and unfortunately due to personal differences and circumstances, this movie never came to be. because Ben wanted to do one thing, and because Ben Hurst wanted to do one thing, and Ken Penders wanted to do another. And according to sources, Ken Penders informed Sega of Ben Hurst's movie idea, and from what I understand, this was one of the major reasons a movie based on the Saturday morning cartoon was dropped. Overall, though, with the exception of its cancellation, the Sonic Saturday morning cartoon, which ran from 1993 to 95, did and still retains a huge fan base to this very day. One which I am very proud to say I'm a part of. And it was because of this fan base that Brian Ward at Shout Factory decided to finally release a complete series DVD set, as I mentioned above, which contains said interview with Ben Hurst, as well as an interview with Jaleel White, who did the voice of Sonic. This DVD set also contains all the episodes as they were first originally aired, uncut. And the reason I say that is because when they went, I think, to the USA Network, USA kind of butchered them a little bit, and many fans didn't like that. And this is also, this DVD set also contains all the episodes as they first originally aired, uncut. And this is also one of the rare times that the fan base was allowed to create cover/disc art for the set. It's also the first time that a fan base website known as Fans United for SatAM was acknowledged for its contribution and its never say die support for the series. So even though the series is not seen on TV statewide anymore, or stateside anymore, it can still be seen on TV courtesy of the DVD box set, individual DVD releases, which contain various episodes, places like on YouTube, and as of February 29th, 2012, on Netflix streaming. Oh, and before I forget, at a Sega store/land in Las Vegas, Nevada. From what one fan's picture has shown us. Overall, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, one way or another, SatAM is being seen by someone, somewhere, and thus the legacy and fan base lives on. And my friends, from my perspective, is the history of SatAM. Thank you all for reading and watching. God bless. So yeah, that basically, in a nutshell, is, from my perspective as a fan, is the history of Sonic the Hedgehog SatAM. Now, I do apologize if I stuttered a little bit there. I do apologize if I kind of stopped a little bit, kind of paused. I was trying to make sure I found my area and trying to find out what was next. Because like I said, it's early, and it's 8:23 in the morning, and this is basically over a half an hour worth of video, I hope. So, again, I'll provide the links down below for where you can read them if you don't really want to watch the video, which I'm pretty sure some of you will take the time to anyway. I mean, with YouTube, when it comes to videos like this, you can stop the video, do something else, go to another video, and then come back to this one. It'll continue on where you left off. But yeah. And as you probably will notice when you read it, I did improvise. So, again, thank you all for watching and possibly reading this. Links will be down below. Comment if you want. Video response if you like. And I will talk to you all later.